Welcome back to Campus Crossfire. This evening I am joined by U of A Young Democrats President Billy Cook and College Republicans President Emily Phillips. How are you guys both doing tonight?
Great, how are you?
Wonderful.
Doing really good. That's awesome. I'm glad to have you guys here. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We got a lot of stuff to talk about with the election as close as it is. So to start out, I guess we can throw it to Emily first. I want to hear your thoughts on President Trump's bout with COVID. He's recently been cleared. What effect do you think this is going to have on his campaign?
Well, I don't honestly think it'll have anything on Trump's campaign. As you all have seen, when he was in the hospital, he worked super hard whenever he did have COVID. He continues to work really hard when he doesn't have COVID. Now he is, not contagious of COVID-19, and I don't believe that it should have any effect with the remainder of his campaign.
All right, and Billy, your response?
I believe few things are going to change either. The president is still going to continue to have his very large rallies that have a lack of social distancing. In fact, the first rally he had at the White House, his supporters were standing shoulder to shoulder. Few of them were wearing masks, and the president himself removed his own mask in front of the crowd, sending a very clear signal that he does not really support mask mandates, which is very frightening considering this uptick in COVID cases we're seeing.
It's interesting that you mention the rallies specifically. We saw a pretty significant turnout at the Tulsa rally in particular, not long before the president tested positive. Emily, do you think that it's a good idea for the president to continue to hold these rallies under such circumstances?
Honestly, yes, I do. I think it's actually very insulting to the American people about the mask mandate that they cannot, make their own choices. I believe that, the best thing for our country to do is open back up, and that, if people need to decide for themselves whether it's in their best interest to, walk into a restaurant or attend a rally and stuff, there's actually been little to no cases, I believe, that have come out of the Tulsa rally for Trump. However, I do not think it is our government's decision in order to tell us what we can and can't do. We, the American people, can decide that for ourselves.
Well, that's a great segue because, Billy, that's what I wanted to ask you. In your response, do you think the government has a right to mandate masks on a federal level?
Yes, the executive branch and Congress are both empowered constitutionally to protect public health. Mask mandates are simple measures that can save thousands of lives. And quite frankly, to have a president who in one mouth says to support the CDC and wear masks while also turning around and saying, let's have large rallies where people do not adhere to any of these measures that are put in place mandated to protect public health. It's just inconsistent messaging, which we've been seeing so much of since this very pandemic began.
So you're speaking about President Trump's response, particularly to the CDC. Emily, I want to hear your response to that. Do you think, just in general, the president has handled the virus well, knowing the information that we've gotten from CDC officials?
Trump has done an outstanding job. I didn't think Dr. Fauci has even mentioned himself and given credit to the Trump administration for their, actions taking place with COVID, early on. However, I do not think that mask mandates are needed. I think I believe in wearing a mask personally. I think asking people to wear a mask for, the sake of themselves and the sake of others is absolutely an amazing thing. However, when you tell people to wear a mask, it will not work. I worked in the state capitol this summer when Asa Hutchinson announced that the mask mandate, and the amount of hateful calls I received, for people telling us that they will not be wearing a mask now. People do not respond to demand. They respond to emotion and telling them what they should do for the benefit of everyone else.
Billy, your response? I want to make sure we get equal coverage here, so it's your turn now.
Well, as so far as the president's response overall to the pandemic, thanks to the work of Bob Woodward, we know that the president was fully aware of the severity of the virus, that it was airborne, and that it doesn't just kill the old and those with pre-existing conditions. It can kill young people as well. He knew this, but instead of warning the American people and giving the American people the understanding and the know-how to actually protect themselves. Instead of doing that, he turned around and intentionally downplayed the severity of this virus, which has led to so many
I wanted to always play it down.
Conspiracy theories about mask wearing. It's led to an additional pandemic of conspiracy theories and ignorance in which almost half of our country doesn't support wearing a basic public health tool.
I would actually like to respond to that. There has been no correlation between countries that have worn masks and that have not worn masks. In fact, they are all, in even states here in the U.S., there's no difference in COVID cases or in COVID deaths. So wearing a mask, I believe in wearing a mask. I think scientifically it makes sense. However, there is no correlation between wearing a mask and COVID.
I would like to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Countries like South Korea, Germany, Italy, France, the UK were all hit hard early on, but then they implemented these lockdown measures and mask mandates, and they got the virus under control. And our lack of mask mandates is why the U.S., with just 4% of the global population, accounts for nearly 25% of all COVID deaths, and that's probably an undercount. If we had had these mask mandates earlier on, a lot more of lives could have been saved.
See, I like how you said that there is an undercount. In fact, you mentioned, countries like South Korea or really any other country. And, there has been kind of a discussion about how the U.S. has had more cases than any other country. Do you not agree that it's probably because we do more testing, for one, than any other country? And also, do you think that there's not any maybe, false data from any other country?
Well, I mean, false data is just a discussion with the leaders of these countries. President Trump himself in mid-February praised China for their reporting of the pandemic and said that they were working very hard and diligently to get it under control. As far as these other countries that have had successful mask mandates, they still have not had a high number of COVID deaths. How can we account for that?
Well, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because the CDC, I do have a little bit of frustration with the CDC as far as, the COVID deaths. We realize that, so as of right now, there's 215,000 COVID deaths, and they all absolutely matter. And we've recently realized, or were informed that I believe 10% of those were, healthy people, no pre-existing conditions. People with pre-existing conditions, absolutely their lives still matter. However, according to Fox 35 in Orlando, and this is one example, a man was counted as a COVID death when he passed away in a motorcycle accident. How many deaths have been counted towards COVID that were not COVID-related deaths? That's a question that I have for the CDC. And in fact, another fact, Texas recently removed over 3,000 cases from the COVID count due to false testing in San Antonio.
All right, guys. I want to shift gears just a little bit here. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I know that we could keep going, definitely, but I want to change gears just a little bit, and I think we should talk about some of the topics that came up in the vice presidential debate last week. So Senator Harris and Vice President Pence had very differing views on the economy. Mm-hmm. So Emily, since you finished up that last bit, I'll throw it to Billy first. Do you agree with Senator Harris that the economy has taken a hit under the Trump presidency?
Absolutely. The economy has taken a nosedive. I believe we contracted in our economy by 33%, which is unprecedented. And even now, the economic rebound that we were supposed to have is slowing down. That's mainly because Congress has not been able to provide any effective stimulus measures. And also, the problems that we're facing with the coronavirus have only been exacerbated, but they have been going on for years now. We have had an economy where 40% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and many of them cannot account for a $400 emergency expense. So if you take away someone's employment or their ability to support their family, you're going to have an economic disaster.